I mean, if it is with all the speakers.
Thank you so much. So a very warm welcome to all of you over here. But as I get started, the fact is that we can't shy away from the unfortunate fact that the world today, debating negotiation has failed. And we are all in our lifetimes witnessing a full-blown war, helplessly full of guilt and wondering what could have been avoided and in what capacity would we help it. And Calix, sorry, that definitely, is overshadowing my mind. It has been overshadowing for all of us.
Very much likewise. It's
correct.
Clearly, obviously, also very close to our borders, and German government is one of the most, principally most involved actors, for good and for bad in many ways. I have many opinions, clearly.
Correct. And Calix, I think that was the whole point. And as we thought about the educator, as we said, we knew that you are closest to ground zero, and it's really amazing that Germany has really taken a stand in terms of giving military aid. It's really the first time in history that countries are coming out in the open and saying, listen, we take a stand and it's not right. And this is where our, opinion lies. And with that, that's a great context for our young minds today, because, they are going to be the future leaders. They've already put themselves on this path of building a real life skill of reasoning, convincing, and as they extend it further, lobbying tomorrow. So I do wish that all of you continue on this path of debating, because the fact is that it is going to be your superpower to shape the world to be a better place. So with that, debaters, spectators who are all here with us, please welcome Calix Fuka. Calix, thank you so much for joining us. He is totally our favorite.
My pleasure.
I have sent a brief note of introduction of yours, Calix, this time, because it actually is quite long with your list of achievements. Thank you so much for joining in. And really, as we get started, Calix, I would love it if you could just spend a minute or so on how you're seeing the situation evolving, considering you're sitting very close to ground zero, on this war itself.
Yes, so obviously the Ukraine war is all over the media, in every corner, in every place, and it's incredibly disorienting in many ways. So obviously, very many different viewpoints coming out, a lot of political actors that haven't been around for decades kind of pop up in the media again and opine on it, and it's quite messy because obviously there's a lot of misinformation also flying around, specifically for a few reasons. One of them is obviously that that there is such things as psyops going on. So specifically, having participants in a war have a significant interest in leaking information and false information that may change the way that the other participants think about the war. And so already it takes a lot of critical reading here and there, and that in itself is very difficult to also kind of to also notice which pictures are fake, which pictures are real, which ones are videos from years ago from a different conflict or from military parades, and which ones are authentic. This is obviously all quite messy. And particularly being in Germany, it's quite a bit of a roller coaster because our political response has been changing significantly and back and forth. And it's and while we do now take significant steps, I must admit I'm not entirely happy with our governmental response. First of all, with our reluctance to actually give up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. In addition to that, we have a Green Party in government for the first time in more than 20 years nearly. And one of the first things they did was sacrifice their climate goals in order to be able to crack down on the Ukraine. And therefore, we are going to stick to pretty nasty coal production for a long time. Specifically, Germany is quite the sinner when it comes to these things. Like we use a lot of lignite or brown coal, which is particularly environmentally devastating. And we're now expanding that and increasing that, which also gives you mixed feelings. In addition to that, there's just the seismic change of our defense budget being tripled. So we used to have 50 billion of defense expenditure, and now it's going to be 150 billion. And I'm worried about what that will mean for our future politics, especially because once you have a lot of defense spending, you will have to progressively justify it, and therefore the use of it will also fundamentally shift. That is something I kind of like looking at a little bit cautionarily, in addition to obviously fuel and gas prices being hiked, which is going to be difficult for me too, but also obviously some gripes about how the sanctions are set up and being a little bit worried and about to what extent it truly targets the elite, and rather than just wanting to bankrupt the entire Russian economy, which I also have humanitarian thoughts about, because I do not believe that that obviously specifically in Russia, you don't have much democratic legitimacy of the government, thus having 100 million people by proxy, plus, of course, all of the border countries of Russia being potentially systematically crippled too in a similar way. All of this in a context where I don't really know any solution. So it's messy and it's painful. And I do know a decent amount of people personally that are able to help and that are actually also organizing things and taking up refugees and setting up civilian efforts. And these things are incredibly heartening.
Yeah.
Although this also takes part in a context where we don't kind of give this sort of treatment to refugees from other areas, and that hypocrisy does also sting. Complicated, basically, to quickly sum this all up.
Yeah, and Alex, seriously, I mean, the fact is that this kind of a situation literally took us back in a time motion of sorts, because our debaters yesterday debated on the theme of geopolitical, but as we delve deeper on saying that what is the similar nature of conflict that we have witnessed as a nation ourselves, and that is how we went back to the historic decision that changed the course of the people here too. And
yes,
you're right about the fact that whole flux of the border, time and again, that constantly creates the chaos, took us back to saying that, if indeed partition was a political blunder, was it an inevitable fact? Could it have been avoided with better diplomatic negotiations by the leaders? And we obviously turned back to our debaters to then sort of come back and unpeel this topic. And hence, they will be today debating on the topic that this House regrets the partition of India. And
I know enough for this for the motion to already give me chills. Obviously, like it's
correct, and we are all sensing it across the world. So,
one tiny last thing I would like to say about the Ukraine that is very interesting, and that maybe something that you can also use for analysis, not maybe in this debate, but in future debates, is different generational impacts. Like specifically in the Ukraine one, you really notice that older generations are hard. Basically, my parents' generation is hit particularly hard by this and are particularly worried. And it's easy to forget that up until 1989, Germany was the most likely place in the world, essentially, to be the first target in a nuclear war. And so you have an incredible agitation of especially older people in Germany that are emotionally brought back into the times where they consistently feared a nuclear war with Russia. And this is kind of a generational trauma that I don't think we talk about much, but the impact of which is incredibly palpable. And specifically when you think about war, when you debate it, it helps very often when you pick out certain target groups and that kind of and make that impact more tangible. And specifically, entire generations being traumatized is incredibly huge. And I'm sure you'll have plenty of that, specifically also with the partition and of course the succession of wars with Pakistan that will probably have scarred a lot of, especially now, slightly older generations than me.
Yes, true.
And you, obviously, like that's.
True, Alex. So very well said. And what we've done, Alex, is again, obviously, we are debating in the British parliamentary format, and we have given the topic 15 minutes prior, now close to, I think, 20 minutes prior to the teams. So with that, I'm sure you have the adjudication sheet with you, Alex.
Oh, blank sheets of paper where I'll take notes. And as usual, yes, I'm prepared.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly confirm the speaker order. Kamal, if you could just pin down the sheet.
Okay.
And the teams can also confirm the speaker order. So the opening government, Arshia and Shrishti, who's going first?
I will be going first. Shrishti will be going second.
Okay. So Alex, so should we quickly just make those notes here while Kamal puts this together? So Arshia is going first in the opening government. And
written it down.
Yeah, I'm just putting that on the chat. Arshia and Shrishti is going second. Okay, and in the opening opposition, who's going first?
We will be going first. She will be the leader of the opposition. I will be the deputy leader going second.
Okay. Alex, you're able to see the chat, right?
Yes.
Okay, and in the closing government, who goes first, please?
Fatima will be going first. I will be going second.
Yes, ma'am.
And Fatima and
Varnika will be going second.
Varnika. Okay. And we have the closing opposition. Shivansha Sneh, who's it going to be?
In the closing opposition, Sneh will be the opposition member and I'll be the opposition member.
Oh, got it. Okay. There, Calix for your paper and pen.
One tiny second. I'm just taking down the last names. All right. All right, perfect. So before we start, I'll be using a debate timing app. So you will hear one bell after the first minute like this. Is that audible enough for you? Okay, fantastic. So you'll hear that after 1 minute and after 4 minutes again. And in between those two bells, you can ask your POIs, and you'll hear two bells when you should slowly come to an end. And at 3 bells, 3 rings, so it's 5:15, I'm not allowed to take any notes more, and anything you'll say will be disregarded from then on. I will not be cutting you off and forcing you to sit down and stop, but you're wasting time at the point at which you speak after 5:15. All right, then without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister to the front. Here. And this is me clapping, by the way, just so you don't get confused.
Yes. Arsha.
Give me a minute. Let me just create my notes.
No worries. In general, at any debating tournament, take your time to arrange your notes in the beginning. No one's going to cut you off or force you to immediately go and speak. I've abused this a lot, up to standing around half a minute sorting my notes just to make sure that to sort my mind. I'm sure that may have made it the difference between a few debates winning and losing. So I encourage to basically abuse the format a little bit where you can. All right, whenever you're ready. Perfect.
All right, yes. Am I audible?
Yes.
All right, I'll be starting my time in 3, 2, 1. The partition of India is one of the most traumatic and spine-challenging parts of Indian history. Something that takes us back in time and brings about such strong feelings of patriotism in us. However, that feeling comes with hate for people we once called brothers. Hello everybody, my name is Arsha and I proudly announce the topic for today. This house regrets the partition of India. The way my team defines this motion is, we'll define the motion as the partition that happened in 1947 that split India into 2 countries, India and Pakistan, during British colonial rule in regrettable. India's history has been of rising out of ashes. England colonized India for almost 2 centuries in the past. The day we signify as our Independence Day is also associated with divide and trauma it brought. After years and years and years of fighting for our right to freedom, it still feels like we lost. We lost because our oppressors were able to hurt us for one last time before they left, and we still feel it affects us even now. India and Pakistan, as a single nation, would have been much stronger and powerful in the world today. Therefore, we regret the partition of India into 2 nations, India and Pakistan strongly. That the mass murder and killing and fall of society caused by the partition was worth it for the long run. My first argument is, the religious divide and rift between India and Pakistan still exists, tracing its root and extreme origin to the partition. The basis on which the British divided India into two was religion. They created a religion rift between Hinduism and Muslims when they announced the birth of Pakistan as Muslim nation and India as Hindu one. With there already being slight rifts and difference between Hindu and Muslims pre-independence, the British were able to take that as leverage and give us this massive divide that thrives on hate and despair for the adult. Something like religion that's extremely personal and sensitive. Wars between India and Pakistan have been, no, not right now, have always been brutal and bloody. We at Side Proposition blame the partition of India of this religious rift threat that threats the safety of hundreds of Indian citizens and soldiers and Pakistan citizens and soldiers. Argument 2, the economy. We all are aware of the world that we all are aware that the world runs on money. Just imagine if the economy had not been divided. We would have built so many more schools, orphanages, and old age homes, and pet shelters too. The entire Indus basin will be back in the control of India. We will easily be able to aid Afghanistan due to Bedouin. No visa while traveling not right now, from Amritsar to Lahore. Both Punjabs will be united. India will have the largest Muslim population. The human resource was literally murdered because of the partition. Is something we still haven't recorded with. However, could we? People literally dying and jumping out of trains just to reach somewhere they thought is home. And if they hadn't taken place in India and Pakistan, we have worked towards rising as a nation together to recover back whatever we lost. We could have regained our title as the gold birds that would have been extremely powerful and rich and in a rich country today. Sports. Let's talk about sports. All of us here have at least one favorite cricketer, and we love cheering for them in the audience. Not right now, thank you. The Indian cricket team would have had more powerful bowlers and skilled batsmen and dominate in the international tournament. A united India could have done wonders for hockey, giving the team an opportunity to soar high than already existing rivals. I would just like to conclude that this nation does regret the partition. Thank you very much. That's my line.
All right, thank you very much. Now I'd like to welcome the Leader of Opposition, Sifty, to the front here.
Sorry, my apologies. I won't be able to switch on my camera. I hope that's
No worries.
clear.
As long you're audible, I can hear you, can follow your speech.
Should I begin?
Whenever you're ready, yes.
A partition in the Indian soul would be as bad as a partition in the Indian soil. Shashi Tharoor. This house firmly believes that the position of India and the partition of India and Pakistan was not an event to be regretted upon because it avoided the outcome of civil war. People themselves thrived for partition, and it was one of the most important reasons that the British decided to leave India. This house agrees with the definition of the partition, and I will be continuing. Now I will present a rebuttal for my opposition. To rebut my opposition's point, the trauma would have continued if India and Pakistan would not have been divided. Right now, we are being opposed by someone we used to call family. The trauma of being turned against someone who was our family, the riots between the Muslims and the Hindus would have been terrifying. In addition to that, internal affairs would have been much worse because the UN clearly states that it cannot participate in internal affairs of any country, which would have not given India the position it has in the UN today, and would have not thrived on its economy. I will be elaborating on this point later. To continue with my points, the partition was one of the solutions as to why the British left. The Independence Act of 1947 outlined the partition. Without the partition, British would not agree to leave us. Now, we can say that this is because they wanted to separate us and make us a weaker country. But India has thrived because of that. India has gained popularity.
I would like to raise a peon.
Yes, please.
You said that if Pakistan would have still been a part of India, there would be a civil war. But because Pakistan is separated from India, isn't India always at a risk of war?
That is true, but a civil war would have impacted the trauma, impacted the citizens of India more. Imagine being betrayed by one of your own. That would have impacted us much more. So continuing with my second point, the Muslim and the Hindus both wanted separation. It was the will of the people that drove that separation. The 1940 speech by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was the founder of Pakistan, highlighted the same thing. Due to the divide and conquer that was already happening and the constant hate between the religion, it was only better that the Muslims had their own dominating country, and India still welcomes Muslims into their country. So there is no conflict on that. Third, the possibility of civil war. I would like to ignore that. The possibility of civil war has been reduced. I agree that there have been wars going on between India and Pakistan for since the partition, but it would have been bloodier and worse if it would have been internal affairs, because right now India and Pakistan do not attack as much due to the UN's power on it, and because declaring war is an international crime. However, if it were an internal affair, the amount of bloodshed would not have been stoppable. There would also have been problems in the economy, since India right now is on a very good position in terms of its GDP, its growth, its sports, and all of that. However, with Pakistan, with the internal disputes that would be happening in between the teams, as stated by my opposition, it would have caused a lack of teamwork and hence a weaker team. So to conclude, this House stands against the motion that the partition between India and Pakistan was regretted. Instead, it is a reason for peace internally in India, less bloodshed, and freedom of the nation. Thank you. This House addressed its case.
All right, thank you very much. Now I'd like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to the front. Here.
Please give me a minute to compile my notes. Thank you.
Oh, you're muted. Oh, no. So no, sorry, I mistook. All right, Srishti, ready when you are. Yes.
Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, firstly, I'd like to consolidate the burden that both the teams have in this debate. The burden on our side of the House is to prove that India and Pakistan as a single nation would have been much stronger and powerful in the world today. Therefore, we regret the partition of India into two nations. Here, we're taking a point of view that benefits both the countries. While the burden on their side of the House is that the mass murder and killings and the fall of society caused by the partition was worth it in the long run. In the first speech that they gave us, they do not back up this burden at all, because they only talk about how India progressed. We here see as India and Pakistan, both the countries, as one, because after all, everyone, we are people, we need to look out for each other, and a religion causing a divide has blinded us from that. Firstly, I'd like to rebut the points that the leader of opposition made. They said that the people wanted the partition, it was their will, that they wanted the partition because it happened because both the parties agree. if that was the truth of the core case, why do we still have wars? Why are we not happy with the partition? Why are there still conflicts? Why are there wars every now and then? Of course there are, because at that time, the entire nation was in such a turbulent, situation. Sorry?
Under information.
No, thank you. At that point, the nation was in such a turbulent condition that the partition seemed like the best option at that point of time. But here, when we see in the long run, we believe that India and Pakistan as a single nation could have been a superpower in today's world. When the opposition talks about civil wars there being civil wars and stuff, yes, we do agree there was a rift between Hindus and Muslims pre-independence. The British took that as an advantage and magnified it to such an extent that they were able to convince Hindus and Muslims that we are rivals of each other. And we gave them that power when we No, thank you. And we gave them that power when we tell us that, yes, it is our will. While at that time, I'm sorry, no, please put all those POIs in the chat. Please don't disrupt me. Thank you. Yeah, it was so I lost my train of thought. Yeah, we believe that India and Pakistan, when we believe that they could have been better together as a nation. When they talk about civil wars, there was a rift, but the British magnified it to such an extent that we're still facing the consequences and the effect of it right now. We believe that the government of a united India would have been much stronger than the first government that separated India and separated Pakistan had, because the prime motive of both these countries would have been development, and the factor and the magnitude of hate towards the other would not have been that much. A strong government could have healed the rift between Hindus and Muslims, and they could have not only brought our economy back, brought a human resource back, they could have brought peace back again. Yeah. The opposition also says that the partition was the reason that Britishers left. No, the partition was not the reason that Britishers left. They found it.
Just to clarify.
Sorry?
POI to clarify.
No, the partition was not the reason that they left. The partition was a way that they hurt, that they proved their dominance over us for one last time after they left, because they could not could not handle the revolt of Indians. They could not handle how widespread these non-violent movements led by Gandhi ji and other such important leaders were spreading. They could not handle Indians. They could not suppress them any longer, and that is why they were forced to leave. We drove them out, but they still, for one last time, drove us into two nations, and we're still facing the consequences of that today, with numerous wars being posed every day, with the people living on the border of India and Pakistan being scared for their lives every day, being the Jammu and Kashmir being such a dangerous place to live in, if I may. Okay, to extend upon my first speaker, we give you two constructors why we think this is a bad idea. Firstly, that this created this major religious drift. Hindus and Muslims all over are now considered as rivals. It is a stereotype that a Hindu and a Muslim is supposed to hate each other, something that we at side proposition do not promote. And Britishers, and when they left, they could do that because we were in such a sensitive position. They could magnify this religious rift between us. Secondly, how they destroyed our economy when they...
5:15, unfortunately, already. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'd like to conclude that I'm proud to propose.
Thank you very much. And I'd also like to remind the speakers that if you prefer POIs in chat, please listen to that in the last speech. After that announcement, we had another one, even if it was a clarification by voice. Please do listen to the speaker's preferences. It can really be distracting. All right. Now I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition to the front to close the opening half. Here.
Just a minute. I'd also like a minute to get my thoughts in order, and I apologize for the interruption.
No worries.
For the rest of you, please do keep the cameras on, and this is a connectivity issue. The ones who are participating in the video.
Right. So, good evening to everyone present here, and I will be presenting my opposition to why we should not be regretting the partition of India. First of all, I'd like to begin by rebutting some of my opponent's points. The main argument you presented were that this was not, in fact, the will of the people, and this disabled the economy further. But this is something we strongly disagree with. First of all, India and Pakistan was partitioned because the Muslims did want to leave. And maybe it was not the entirety of the population, but it was a majority of the population. So are you really willing to cripple the free will of those Muslims just so that India could be whole again? I will be expanding upon this later with my own point. But to go on further, why are we not happy today and why are there still wars? Because of the religious turmoil. I would like to clarify here that the rift was already present. And this was not the Britishers doing. It was our own doing. And we are the ones who enabled the partition of it. You cannot blame the partition for the religious war going on. Another point was the economy that you brought up. First of all, you talked about how the government would be stronger and would enable a more unified country. But what use is a government? It would be even more useless than ever if the two parties in the government hated each other. They would be able to have no agreements whatsoever and would just end up in deadlock all the time. And you pointed out that India would have been a better superpower, but India is already a superpower. We have flourished to the greatest extent. From being the richest country to being the poorest country during British occupation, we have risen up again in the highest ranks of the world and are recognized for it today. And I would like to bring up this point brought up by the Prime Minister that sports is also an important factor, but sports is not a big concern. And I would like to negate that argument here. Sports is important, but some competition should not be worried about. You should not be worried about certain competition, and it should not be discouraged. So I don't think sports should be a valid argument here. Yes, POI?
Okay. You talk about India being a superpower at this point in time. Do you think Pakistan is also a superpower?
Pakistan is not a superpower, but it is a smaller country. And I will go on to show how the partition has also benefited the Muslims. I'll be continuing on to my arguments right now. So I'd like to come to the point that the Muslims did actually want a new country. As highlighted by my opposition leader, in 1940, Muhammad Ali Jinnah gave a speech pointing out that a Muslim state was highly required. I would also like to support this with more points. Many Muslims consider Independence Day not only independence from the British, but also independence from a Hindu-dominated nation. Living in a country in an area where one religion, you have to agree, India is always dominant. Hindus have always dominated India, no matter was it unified India or a partitioned India. So living in a area where the Hindus are in power was obviously not something all Muslims were okay with. They were in many cases suppressed, even as it's going on today. Like you can see today. There were killings based on religion, based on the hate that was garnered. First of all, why was the hate there? Are you saying it's because of the rift, because of the partition? I mean, no, it was not. The reason of the hate started in long before. One of the reasons was the revolt of 1857. You do know that during the revolt, people blamed each other for the failure of the revolt. 1857 was a great revolt and spread all over India, but it did fail. And it failed because of non-unity. And that was why both the religions blamed each other. And this hate has simply grown, magnified so many times. And it reached to the point where people did want a separate country. Again, this was the free will of the people wanting a separate country. You cannot cripple their will and say that, no, you should not be partitioned because it is benefiting us as a whole. And I would like to move on to my next point, that the partition resulted in the dissolution. Yes, it was not the only reason that the British agreed to leave India, but it was highlighted in the Independence Act of 1947, and thus proves that it was a very important reason, and one of the reasons at least, that the British agreed to peacefully leave India. The British, of course, ruled over the whole of India and wanted best for the entirety of India. Not best, but they wanted to agree to everyone's wishes, and they could only do this by partitioning India into India and Pakistan. Coming on to the possibility of a civil war. Yes, you talked about how war is still going on. War is obviously going on, but there's always a threat of war. You cannot say there's no threat of war. There's a threat of war with China as well, and we were never part, India and China were never part of one unified country. And the civil war in a country would have been so much worse, because as my opposition leader pointed out, there would be no UN to stop us. A civil war is much worse because it's from inside your own borders, and there is nothing to stop the actions of people inside the border. Thus, I would like to conclude that this partition should not be regretted and was only for the benefit of everyone involved.
All right, thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask Fatima to open the second side of this debate for Team Closing Government. Here.
Yeah, I just like to inform you, my camera will probably not work. I'm sorry.
No worries. All right, ready when you are, and don't forget to unmute yourself. Right now, you're still muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
You already started. Oh, okay.
Sorry. I'll start.
No worries. That happens.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Fatima Zara, and this house regrets the partition of India. Firstly, I will start with 3 rebuttals, and then I will move on to my constructives. Firstly, the opposition has stated that we have avoided a civil war. We are at war still. The Kashmir war is going on as right now, and that is a war still. Secondly, they talked about how constant hate was present before the partition, and they said that the Muslims are welcomed in India right now. I myself am a Muslim, and I have been discriminated against. People have called me a Pakistani, and that does exist. Hate between Muslims and Hindus in India does exist. Thirdly, they talk about free will with consequences. You have to deal with the consequences. The right to do something does not equal the right to the consequences. The consequence, if you pick up a gun and kill someone, that is your free will, but that is also a crime. Now, this might not sound as related, but the partition of India and Pakistan has led to a war that did end in the deaths of people. Now, I will be moving on to my constructives. My constructives will be as follows. My first constructive talking about the Kashmir attack and riots that took place after the partition. And my second constructive is going to talk about enmity that exists between India and Pakistan. So my first constructive, the Kashmir attack and the riots. We all mostly understand the situation, but it is as follows. Kashmir, once a lush and peaceful area, is now under attack, where innocent civilians' lives are at risks all the time. The whole fight is based upon land, a fight which asks, who does Kashmir belong to? The fight is a fight between governments, and the government's war has affected the civilians. In case the partition had not taken place, this would never have happened. People would never have died. Does the proposition not regret the state that of Kashmir? In case of the partition never happening, it would not have happened. People would not have died. Now the riots have followed the India and Pakistan partition, and this disrupted peace. Now my second constructive, which is going to talk about the enmity between India and Pakistan. Over the years, we have heard many comments which specifically talk about this situation, and we know how disturbing it is to hear such comments about a country that was once essentially the same as ours. Pakistan was separated, and it was named to be Pak, which equals pure. I do not believe that a separation which leads to so many wars, the Kashmir War, the Kargil Wars, only a few examples, is pure. I hope we truly see that the partition should be regretted by all of us. It spills innocent blood. It has led to enmity, which is never a good thing. Hindus and Muslims are still divided within India. Discrimination does take place. I don't think we should forget the riots that took place just a few months ago. I believe we might have forgotten them because loads of news nowadays, but still we should not forget enmity exists. The partition did not solve anything. Kashmir would still be a blessed and peaceful place. Certain people would not have died. It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? With that, I would like to conclude my speech, and I believe my reasons have correctly proved that the motion must stand. Yes, PY.
You talk about the Kargil war, right? But in a united India, wouldn't there still be a lot of internal conflicts, and won't that be a major, controversial point of lives being affected than the Kargil war itself, with internal conflicts in a united India today?
Well, conflicts are still taking place. The Kargil war still took place, and I don't think the partition ever did anything to solve that. That's why we regret the partition of India. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to welcome Sneh to the front to open the case of side closing opposition. Here.
Yeah, I'll take just a minute. And also for everyone, I'll be taking my POIs in chat. Thank you. I'm starting in 3, 2, 1. The question, panel, has not been answered in this debate yet. The question is whether war would have happened in a united India, and Pakistan, and would it have been better in that situation? Would communal hatred end and die in a united India and Pakistan? And we haven't gotten a response about that. All the arguments till now have been about how after partition there was a lot of bloodshed and etc. But they haven't proven to us till yet why that would not happen in a united India and Pakistan. And that's exactly what I want to prod over in my speech. You'll be getting about 6 pieces of rebuttal and 3 extensions through my speech. The first rebuttal being about the very burden that they put us under. They say that our burden to prove here in this debate is that bloodshed is okay, that the bloodshed that partition caused is okay, but I like you to refer to the dictionary itself and understand that to regret anything, a thing needs to go from good to bad and from bad to worse. We do not believe that a partition went from a bad position to worse, but what is this bad position, right, panel? We believe that communal hatred already existed in India from 1905 because of the Bengal partition. Referring to the history books, we already know that irrespective of the partition, irrespective of anything that was going to happen, even in a united India and Pakistan, communal hatred would have existed, and that communal hatred would have been more difficult to combat. Coming to the second rebuttal, would communal hatred hurt us only through partition? How it would hurt us either ways, that even without partition we would be in a scenario wherein people are not able to interact with each other, wherein we're actually not able to get global support over this situation. We'll go with the closing POI.
So yes, you talk about how hatred was there. Yes, but do you not believe that the British significantly amplified the hatred, which is what
Right, I
happened?
got the question. And I do believe that the Britishers in this situation are the villains, but I do not believe that their actions regarding partition was actually the one wherein they acted as a villain. I believe that the actions in Bengal partition in 1905 was a moment communal hatred started in India, and that would have existed, that would have persisted even without partition, and that would have been actually more difficult to handle, because there was this piece of information that we got from the deputy prime minister wherein they said that a united government would be able to handle partitions, would be able to handle communal hatred in a better manner. But actually, in a situation where you've got one country, no other country to go to, and also each and every politician works upon propaganda, works upon facilitating hatred in the present world just to get more votes, we do not believe a united government would have made it better. We only believe that a war, a riot, a civil war actually would have persisted. And why is that bad? Because my first is extension that I provide to you. So first is that state responsibility would not be present in a united India and Pakistan. You would be having a state actor versus a non-state actor, and we do not believe that non-state actor would be under any burden to help the people. That non-state actor would actually just be shouting about freedom. And in such wars we have seen in Syria, we have seen in various Middle Eastern countries wherein such civil wars persist for years and years, and no country is able to do anything about it, because again, it is the personal matters of the country, and the country would not be able to go out of it. But second of all, also panel, why diplomacy talks right now are happening between India and Pakistan is because there is a state actor versus a state actor, and that situation actually facilitates a hope, a very probability of having peace talks, of having peace between these two countries. But also panel, we would actually try to focus upon the way India and Pakistan wars and conflicts have existed, right? From the 2000s and from the 2010s, to be more precise, there have only been bursts of war panel. There have been wars, and then it has stopped because with peace talks, and then war again. Notice that how this would be continuous in nature in a civil war. We're not in any way saying that wars right now which are happening between India and Pakistan are good. We're just saying that these wars would continue to happen each and every day, and there would be no scope of any sort of peace because you're again working with a non-state actor. But coming to my second argument, that there's this presumption that hate started because of partition, right? There's this presumption that Hindus versus Muslims, this very analogy came with the partition. But then again, I'll ask my dear proposition to refer to the history books. Bengal partition happened in 1905. You had riots in 1919 during the freedom revolution between Hindus and Muslims. You have people protesting against Britishers for the partition. This partition was inevitable. And also panel, notice that how Pakistan as an idea already persisted from 1905. Even before Bengal partition, this idea persisted, this idea was present, but it gained force during the Bengal partition. And that's why we do not believe that a world would have been better off. The world would have been easier to live in without the partition of India. And our burden is not to prove to them that why bloodshed is justified. Our burden is to prove to them that two state actors are better than one state actor and one non-state actor, which we've already given. Very proud of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Then I'd now like to ask Vanika to the front to close the case for side government. Please do correct my pronunciations. I'm trying to get better at them. So when I butcher your names, please tell me.
Yes, give me a I'm Varnaka Kothari, and today I'll be acting as the government voice for the closing government. I would first like to begin with my rebuttals. The opposition's whole speech is based on the fact that civil wars would have happened within India. But I do not understand why civil wars would have happened. You are saying that there was communal hatred far before the partition, during the Bengal partition. But even when Pakistan was separated, haven't several religions been living within India? I can name Jainism, Buddhism, Zoroastrian, Sikhism. And there are numerous religions which are living together. Yes, there would have been small arguments, but they would be limited to maybe a neighborhood or maybe a certain area. In countries like the United States or in countries like Europe, where immigrants are in such a large number. There are several religions, but they live together peacefully. There are arguments, but that they do not lead to bloodshed. All the partition ever do was there was a small matchstick and the partition added fire and kerosene to it. That's all the partition ever did. The partition stopped the growth of Pakistan forever. The deputy leader of opposition answered POI saying that Pakistan did not flourish enough. Well, don't you think it is the fault of the partition? Because somehow you are related to a person sitting in Pakistan. Don't you feel bad that they didn't get the equal opportunity as you did? Isn't that if partition would not have happened, India would have grown as a whole. India would have become one of the super forces of the world. I would now like to rebut a second point where you said that religions and free will, that it was the will of the Muslim people. I would once again like to repeat my point that there would have always been arguments. But when there's an argument in your family, you do not break your family apart. You try to rebuild it. And breaking a motherland apart was not at all the reason. It was not at all the solution, and wars are still happening. You are saying the wars can be controlled by the UN, but I do not see how they can be controlled. The wars of Kashmir, the wars of Bangladesh, East Pakistan and West Pakistan, they divided India forever. We are, yes?
Yes, does your side believe what sort of diplomacy would occur on your side between a non-state actor and a state actor, and what burden does the non-state actor is under to fulfill any of your demands?
I'm sorry, I actually didn't quite understand your POI. I would like to continue with my speech. I guess you were talking about that how would Pakistan be governed if it was a part of India. But if Pakistan was a part of India, it wouldn't have been a complete Muslim state. There would be Muslims spread all around the country. And as the closing government said, the Muslims would not be treated in a different way. They would be a part of us. Because at the end of the day, we all are humans and we all have the same blood. I would not like to take it now. I would like to continue with the main clashes we have seen from the government and opposition side. You are saying that civil wars would happen, but I do not believe that. Every second, every day, there's a fear of constant wars. A member of the opposition said that Pakistanis are allowed to come to India, but have you ever seen the other picture? Indians are not actually allowed to go to Pakistan. If they want to go, they need to have a business visa taken from the Pakistani embassy, and they cannot live there for more than 2 to 3 days. That is what separations have caused. India has lost millions and millions of what it could have earned over the years. Trade and economy. India has lost one of its main export routes because Pakistan is near the Arabian Sea, the heritage of the Indus Valley civilization. Everything has been lost, and if India was a whole, that would never ever have happened. I would now like to go to my next flash. When the opposition said that internal disputes would have continued. If there were no I would not like to take your POI. If there were no partitions, India would not have been religiously diverse. Like there must have been many religions, but we all would have lived together like a family. When we look at our hand, every finger has a different size and measure, but we need all of them to flourish. And that is what India needs. Trade, economy, and the opposition also said that sports wouldn't have been that important. But actually, India has flourished in sports, and it is a really important sector. Because when we're talking about a nation who has just recovered from independence, we need to grow. I would like to take the POI.
You're saying that Pakistan and India together would have, impacted the economy as well as sports. I would still like to ask you, how would sports impact the economy in any way? Any significant way that would be avoided by Pakistan and India together?
Yes, I would like to repeat. I did not say that sports would impact the economy. All I'm saying is that when we look at countries which have actually flourished, and when we try that India should become a country which flourishes in all the aspects, sports and sciences are very big ones. I would like to conclude saying that the partition of India is a bad thing which we all should regret, and it should never have happened in the first place. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. One interesting thing happened here. I wanted to make like one rule announcement. So obviously after 4 minutes, you're not allowed to technically offer POIs. However, depending on the judge, you are, because it is a rule that protects you as a speaker, you are able to waive that privilege and take it later sometimes, but that depends a little bit on the judge themselves. Some may actually stick more closely to the rules, and therefore I would actually suggest that in general, if you want to take a POI in your speech, you can ask for one at like 4 minutes, for instance, or like one right before the last minute starts. However, I do allow you to waive your own rights and take it when it's more convenient for you. But in general, do be careful with that and try to rather take it right before your end time. Simran, you've got a question?
Yeah, I just have a question. Is the bell still ringing at every 1 and 4 minutes? Because I don't think I can hear it.
Oh, okay, that's great. Good that you tell me. Yeah, it is still
I
ringing.
didn't hear it, so I didn't know my 4 minutes had ended.
Ah, okay. No worries. But it did bring up this interesting point. This actually is I base my way of going around it on one precedent. It was in a Euros or Worlds final where the Dutch speaker basically waived his protected time and decided to take a POI within the first minute, and the judges allowed that. And because of my interpretation of the rules as being that your speaking time is protected from a speaker's perspective, and therefore you have the right to not be interrupted in the first minute and the last minute. It's in BP is actually quite interesting when you take a look at the deep rules, etc. I highly encourage that, because the better you understand the format, the better you can optimize for it. And specifically being very clear about the rules and burdens is a great way to also beat very good speakers. All right, now without further ado, I'd like to welcome Shivansh to the front to close the case, closing opposition and this debate as a whole here.
So could I just take a minute?
Take your time to arrange your notes, and I'll be ready when you are.
Yes, Judge, I'm ready. I'll begin my time in 3, 2, 1, go. This House regrets the partition of India. We strongly oppose this motion. Just to restate the framework that has been going on by the opposition, if we are able to prove that the partition of India should not be regretted because of the present events, we shall win this debate. And that is exactly what the opposition has done today, Judge. Good afternoon, Judge and opponents. I'm Shivansh Gupta, and I will show you and summarize the entire debate by proving why we should not regret the partition of India. In my entire speech, I'll be first listing the clashes, 2, extending on to my partner if there's any time, and 3, concluding and summarizing the debate. So, Judge, first let's start with the main clashes of this debate, right? One, the main clash that comes in this debate is hate and religious divide. But we show you that this hate and religious divide has been there from before, and this has been there through, we can see the examples of the Mughal Empire. The hate and divide of religion has been there before in India and has been there around the world. So the idea that it has come because of the partition does not stand. Secondly, coming on to a very common argument in this debate, sports, and they talk about cricket. But Judge, they mention how the Indian cricket team would have been more powerful with borders extending to Pakistan, but talent is made and bled through practice, not by the country. So it is not the case by having Pakistan and India, having united India, we would have better cricket players, we would have more revenue. Look at Abhijit Banerjee, Amartya Sen. These are Indian Americans who are strong in their field, and it does not matter if Pakistan would have been there in India, because irrespective of the fact, the practice and the practice is creating the sports athletes, not the country which they come from. And that's exactly the point which it makes their point on sports redundant in this debate. Third, coming on to Pakistan, they say Pakistan in a different nation would still be at conflict. But Judge, we have the United Nations today. We have diplomatic efforts, which is why, but in a Pakistan inside India, we will have internal conflicts which they do not miss, which they completely miss during this debate. And we show you how these internal conflicts will be much more effective. India and having internal conflicts in itself won't be able to solve this, but something like diplomacy today, where we have Pakistan as a different country, has helped in solving these issues. Fourthly, they talk about how Pakistan showed British dominance, the partition showed British dominance, but since they argue British dominance, right, Judge? But this does not show the fact that we should regret the partition, because the partition, like they agree, was caused by the Britishers, and this idea of divide and conquer came from the Britishers, not from the partition. So we are essentially regretting the fact that the Britishers coming to India was the wrong thing, and the Britishers coming to India should be regretted, not the fact that the partition happened. So we show you how the British dominance was is something that should be regretted, not the partition, which was a later consequence. Then they talk about India-Pakistan government together would be stronger. But as said by an Indian freedom fighter itself, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, known as the Iron Man of India, a country divided itself cannot survive, which is exactly what we show you throughout this debate. If having Pakistan and India, where we have internal conflicts at every neighborhood and every point, India united won't be able to survive, and that's the entire point of the debate. We show you how, just like how India freed Bangladesh. Bangladesh was being discriminated by Pakistan, West Bangladesh, East Bangladesh, in East Pakistan, and how India helped in freeing East Pakistan. And the idea that India could free them because they were having internal conflicts shows that the partition should not be regretted, because it helped in solving these internal conflicts in a country like Pakistan. So if East Pakistan could be separated, the idea of separating Pakistan from India is the right decision, because we could solve these potential conflicts that come in the future. I'll not be taking the POI. And now coming on to the point of discrimination, they give their example. They show you how they themselves have been discriminated in India. But George, it does not matter, because Hindus present in current Pakistan still are being discriminated. Muslims in India are still being discriminated. So just because we add Pakistan and India together and create a united India with Pakistan does not mean that discrimination will still not be there, because religious factions will still exist, and that proves a united India will still have discrimination. And George, lastly, they talk about how these conflicts, these internal conflicts, their only rebuttal was that it will be limited to the neighborhood. But George, limited to the neighborhood shows the fact, even if it is limited to one neighborhood, these ideas would spread around in united India. And that's how revolutions begin. The American Civil War, it began from being limited to a neighborhood. The French Revolution, it began from being limited to Paris, but it spread across the entire government of France, right? And that's what would happen in a united India, which is why internal conflicts will still rage, and which is exactly why we should not regret, which is why we should not regret the partition of India, because it created a Pakistan, a free will Pakistan and India differently. And now they talk about trade routes, but we show you that the trade routes will still not be possible in a united India, because religious factions will take over these trade routes. So lastly, George, just to summarize our points, one, we show you communal tension has always been there. We show you examples of Bengal. We show you examples of Gujarat. Communal tension has always been there. Two, we show you religious violence was there from before. Three, Pakistan and India together currently would have internal divide. Four, discrimination would still be there in a united India. And five, sports does not matter, because sports comes through practice, not through the country you come from. So George, please vote for India, where we do not have internal conflict. Don't